Yo,
Hey, Puddin'.
what's up, handsome?
Uh, I'm so old. Okay, there we go. Sorry,
I'm
I'm not
older
good at
than
the
you.
Zoom
You
thing.
say that. You
I
say
was
that
count-
every time, and I'm
I,
2 years older than you.
I know, but
So
let's be
rude.
honest, Jesse. I'm less tech savvy. I got more aches and pains. I'm older than you are. Maybe not chronologically,
Yeah, that's like when Peyton, hopefully he sees this, says he's an old man at 30.
but
Oh, god damn it! It's freezing again. 1 second. Let's see something.
yeah. So that's the one thing I wanted to.
There we go.
Okay, so I didn't know if last time the lag was because of me or you. So
I think it was both. I think it was a real team effort.
okay. Okay. Well, I'm at the Legion today, and their Wi-Fi, they assure me, is top notch. So
Yeah, the Wi-Fi here is not great, and so I actually turn off my Wi-Fi and use data because it's better than it does.
I got you.
So,
Okay. All right.
yeah,
So
just an interesting little tidbit.
what?
Oh, no, turning off the Wi-Fi. That's not it's
Sorry.
not interesting.
It sounded like you were going to say something. Okay. All right.
No,
So here's what's so I've gotten to calling this podcast the DFS podcast. And
Yeah.
I was talking to Patrick about it, and he's got all kinds of sound equipment and editing capabilities and stuff like that. So we might actually make this to where it's not, just a Zoom meeting that gets posted on YouTube, which sounds pretty slick to me. I'm pretty ADD though, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that being said, what I thought I'd try, and obviously this first part will just get edited out, but what I thought I'd try is like introductions, right?
Yeah.
So, and because I sat down and I was trying to write out your introduction, but I realized there were just gaps, right? You're such a sojourner that I think it's just better for you to do it because I'm going to fuck it up. So,
Well, why don't you introduce yourself first? This is your baby.
that I shitted it out. Okay. All right. So, I don't know what to do with my hands. So I just get it. All right. This is the DFS podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Russell, head coach of the White River Rugby Club, assistant coach of Carmel High School Rugby, and treasurer for the Dead Fish Society. With me today is Jess Stormer, who is our strength and conditioning coach. Jesse, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So how I'll try to not be a total dickhead, and I'll try to summarize it very quickly. I played a lot of different. I played a lot of different sports as a kid. I basically stopped playing sports essentially in high school, except for skiing, for some not very interesting reasons. In my 20s, I went to college and was sort of had intermittent success, and started doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and a little bit of boxing. I was also a professionally certified ski instructor at the time. And then I left school. I went to law school, finished law school. I suffered a really bad back injury. Sometimes I reference that. That's actually probably pretty important to the story. I suffered what at the time when it occurred was not particularly serious, but I could not get better, and it led to it was pretty debilitating at times. And so I stopped training and I stopped lifting. I'd lift, train for maybe like 1 week, and then the pain would get so bad. And so for the span of about 3 or 4 years, it was actually very, very difficult for me to train consistently. Started figuring out ways to train without hurting my back. My back got significantly better. Started training seriously again, lifting and riding my bike. And then decided to go back to school. Wasn't particularly happy with being a lawyer, to study exercise science. While I was in school, I was recruited to play tennis. So I went back and I played tennis, and then
Where was
I
school?
transferred to, I'm sorry?
Where was school?
I played tennis at Glendale Community College in Southern California, in Glendale, California, right outside LA. And that's actually, despite the fact that I played for them, traditionally a very good tennis program. And if anyone's listening who understands what this statistic means, I think it was like 1% of their players would turn pro, which seems like a pretty low number, but for a community college tennis program to produce like,
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's actually kind of insane, right? And they would consistently send players to like D1 programs and stuff like that. So very good program. I was there literally to fill numbers. And then I transferred, and yeah, story of my life, there to fill numbers. Uh, uh, and I was talking about the rugby team and the lacrosse team about playing, and because of eligibility rules, I would not have been eligible to play rugby. For the A side, I would have had to play for the B side, which in and of itself was not a problem, but it was going to be a little bit tricky and stuff with the team. And then the lacrosse team, they were like, if you come and play for us, you can be head strength and conditioning coach. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's what I'm trying to accomplish, so that's what I have to do. So my first lacrosse practice was the first time I picked up a lacrosse stick. And I played face-off and defensive midfielder for those who know lacrosse. And then the year after that, the field hockey team was looking for players, and it was a co-ed team, and they traditionally would recruit from the men's lacrosse team. And again, I came in so I could fill out numbers. And then I graduated, moved around a bit, coached in a bunch of different places. Sorry, I'm talking about my only athletic background, but there's a bunch of coaching that I did
Fine, whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. Graduated in the middle of COVID, which was pretty tough to find work. Got an internship at a facility called IFAST, Indianapolis Fitness and Sports Training, which is how I ended up in Indiana the first time. Did an internship with Syracuse University. From there, I returned back to California. I then got an internship with the Dallas Jackals. They canceled their season due to COVID. And then from there, ended up working for what is now Rugby New York, the New York Ironworkers, but at the time was called Rugby United, Rooney. From there,
what? Sorry, you cut out. Ended up working for who?
Rugby New York, the professional team in New York. They were called Rugby United. Some people might remember them. They were Rooney for a couple of years. And then while I was working for them, I found a team that was like pretty close by, and I was like, oh, I can actually practice with this team, which I hadn't been able to meaningfully do in years. So I went out and I played with that team, and that's how I started playing rugby. I was coaching rugby before I was playing. And then from there, I worked a little bit as a personal trainer in New York, and came to Indianapolis, IFAST, Indianapolis Fitness and Sports Training. They had a position open up. The guy I was replacing was going to go work with the Indiana Pacers. So I replaced him. And then when I returned to Indiana, work made it very difficult to play because work continued, get off work normally around 8:30, kind of at the absolute earliest, which, as we know, practice has already ended by then. And then one day, you've heard this story, Jeff, but for anybody who's listening, one day I was walking into the grocery store and I saw someone. Oh, and I'd researched teams, and again, because the search terms are not particularly well optimized, like looking up Indianapolis rugby only brings up one result, and that is the Impalas. And I was like, this team seems to take it pretty seriously. I don't think they're going to let me just show up to games. I
Right.
think they're going to actually, which is appropriate for a D2 team to say like, hey, you probably need to show up to practice. Like that's an appropriate demand to make on your players.
So
And
little side thing there. On presence, I want to show you. You can see if I can find him. Thomas. So I don't think I can zoom this way. Yeah, I can't zoom this way. But trust me when I say that there is somebody out there who Googled rugby Indianapolis, and we came up first. So all the reels and shit that we've been doing has paid off, and we're now at the top of the organic clicks, guys.
that shit's really important. It's like it's genuinely really important. Like for real. And what a perfect example that like in the span of 2 years, two people had two completely different experiences. And like I went through like I think it was the Midwest Rugby Football Union website, right? And I was clicking on teams and maybe if I'd kept up with it more, I would have found you or the Outcasts. But I was like clicking on teams and I'd click on their location and I finally got fed up, right? I was like, you know what? No other team is coming up around here, right? Like I'm clicking on these locations and none of them are around here. So I just gave up, right?
Right.
And
Right.
and of course, like like it didn't even occur to me like you should type in Carmel, you should type in Fisher, like but whatever. It was like I could not find any other men's team or adult team other than the Impalas. And so until I was walking into the grocery store one day and somebody was coming out with a rugby jersey, right? And it turns out it was Peyton. and I was like,
Peyton.
and I remember, what's up?
I said, shout out Peyton Sanders.
Yeah. And it's funny because I remember it, like some memories really stick with you. And that memory really, really stuck with me because I was like, oh shit, that means there's other rugby around here. Oh, and one other thing I should point out that the first rugby game I played, the guy who actually got me onto the field was a professional player. He was playing for the other team and he saw me on the sidelines and he's like, Jesse, did you get in? I was like, no, I'm just waiting for somebody to sub in. And he goes, no, you're playing. And he literally grabs our coach and he goes, put Jesse in. And the guy's like, oh, okay, yeah, I don't care. Right. This is like a 40-minute B-sides game, right? So like, doesn't matter, right? And so like, and at this point, like I didn't really quite understand like the culture because again, this is like my first like seniors game, right? I don't understand the culture that like people are just like, oh yeah, just grab a jersey. Like it's like after the official game, it's much more similar to like pickup, like than it is like yeah. And so anyway, yeah. And the first tackle, I remember this too. One big flanker is coming right at me, and I tackle him, and it was like the scene in Requiem for a Dream. I'm showing my age here, and like where the pupils dilate. Right?
I know exactly what you're talking about. That movie still to this day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was like I mean, it was like doing heroin. I mean, I made my first tackle. I was like, oh, that was probably like one of the coolest things I've ever done in any sport. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, and from then on, I was like, oh, I'm hooked. Like that was so much fun.
Man, that's such an interesting way to put that, is because that's what I've been doing this a long time, right? Well, there's people that have been doing it longer, but I would submit that 20 years staying intimately involved in amateur rugby is a long fucking time. And I see people all the time just get the bug. That's what I call it. But it's really more like an addiction, right? And so it's like you say, like you just get that instant reward of whatever amazing moment on the pitch, which by the way, we said this last time in our dry run, is you forget those moments, right? There's very seldom Like you forget the score. There's like stuff that happens on the pitch is just a blur a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
There's specific moments like this, your first tackle, but statistically speaking, you make what, 3,000 tackles a season? Like, I bet I'm not far off from that. And so, or probably a year, not a season, but anyway, you get my point. And so anyway, my point is that these people, I see it happen. They're trying it out. They're going to touch, right? They do a few trainings. Maybe then they do some tackle practice, but it's never 100%, right? And then they go to a game, and then that happens. Like the pupils dilate, and they're just hooked, and they don't have to say anything to me. I'm just like, oh yeah, he's a lifer. We got another one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it was absolutely, and it was funny because later I asked the guy, and his name is Joe Brady. Plays for White Plains in New York, and I was like, "Hey man, like, did you see my tackle?" And he was just like, "It was amazing." Right? He's like, "It was so great. You smashed the guy." and it was just like, "Oh shit, this guy's running at me. I gotta hit him, man. I have to hit him, right?"
Right.
But yeah, and then from there, sorry, yeah, that was the first moment. Came to Indiana, saw Peyton wearing the jersey. Peyton and I had a couple false starts when it came to communication. Seems like those issues have been ironed out a little bit. Yeah, and then as the story goes, basically said, "Hey, I can't make it to practice, but I'd be happy. Like I literally cannot make it to practice, but I'll show up to games and I'm willing to travel." And I think, yeah, that's kind of the classic amateur thing with, so like, if you can travel, you can play. Like if you travel, you'll get to play, right? So yeah, so the first time I met the team was the game against the Celts.
Fucking Celts, tough sons of bitches. Shout out to my buddy Beck that plays.
Yeah, that was
so all right, so excellent story, and it also said nothing about you as a person besides I would venture to say the fact that you're a Rolling Stone. So so here's my introduction to Jesse, is that you are eccentric. You are unapologetically consistent in your approach to fitness and sports performance. And your approach, I would submit, is unorthodox. And
I think probably all of those would be true. Yeah, I'm not sure I can argue with any of those.
Yeah. And I think impressively so. I think it's really easy to find, not to disparage the CrossFit community, but I think it's easy to find the CrossFit mentality of just get after it, which is good. It's better than doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
And the phrase that you like to use is submaximal running or submaximal effort. There's a lot of that in rugby, right? There's several minutes per match of just moving around a pitch, interspersed with 100% effort, right? But there's still a lot of just moving around the pitch, just getting into spots. It's a lot of jogging and shuffling and backpedaling, twisting left and right, and none of it is maximum effort. But to your point, which I think is a refreshing one, is that your approach to training rugby players specifically is nobody's ever said you're too fast, you can't play for us.
Yes.
So
yeah, that's never happened.
The sub-maximal effort can be done by any asshole, right? Like,
yes.
do some down up sprints, do just run pattern, run, the one exercise I like to do before I learned that it ran people off was sprint up to the 5, jog across the pitch, sprint up to the 22, jog across the pitch, sprint up to the 50, jog across the pitch. So you run lines is what I called it. And then so there would be shorts and longs. And so the shorts, so you would do that to the pitch, down to the other end of the pitch, and then you would do bear crawls for the shorts and jog, or you did, right? So it became a circuit, a sub-maximal running, which is fine. And I think it has a place. But also, if you do it too much, it runs people off and they don't feel like they're really getting anywhere, right? There's not like, oh, I've been running lines with Coach Russell for the last 3 weeks, and I can definitely tell that my rugby game is improved. But your approach to, which is heavy in rest, way more rest than I want as a coach, and I would say most rugby coaches agree with that, or at least at the amateur level that I coach at, right? But measurable, undeniable, unarguable improvements and results from your program, if I were to plug you so generously. And
thank you.
And so much so that we did this in the spring. We had you be the RSNC coach in the spring. 0 injuries, nothing but just improvement, right? And the culture was there, which I thought was a really big piece. And now, because you are the sojourner that you are, you're in Philadelphia, but you worked out at a remote program for us. And it's one of the things I want to get into is just how that's working for us, how I'm able to implement it as a coach, which loses a step, just because we've been spoiled by the fact that you implemented this for us in the spring, right? But I still think it's way, way, way better than any kind of S&C program I could have done on my own. But I would say, all in all, queer talent, obviously, way, it probably gets frustrating at times because you got to dumb down whatever the fuck you're saying so that Indiana rednecks like me can understand it. And then you just, when it seems like my observation on our short little friendship over the last year and a half has been that when you know something is right, you don't back down from it unless you can be proven wrong. You're usually right. So there's my introduction of it.
Well, that's very, very flattering. I really, really appreciate it. So there's a couple things. Yeah. So if somebody is watching this and doesn't know anything about me, there's probably a couple things that I would say, and obviously these are conversations you and I have had, is that I'm trying to think of a good way. All right. So one of the things we sort of discussed in the dry run is time, right? So when you start calculating out how much time you have with a player, especially at the amateur level, right? You start realizing like, oh man, I have no time with these players, right? Like the average player in a season, what was it? I think we did the calculation. The amount of training time the average player is going to have in practice is something like, what was it, like 36 hours or something like that over the course of one season. And like, let's say you have 2 seasons, and let's just exclude sevens for right now or anything like that, right? So let's say you have 2 full training blocks, right? Because some teams don't do. Some teams will actually, in my experience, like my New York team, they were like, unless you're playing sevens, don't come to sevens practice, right? We're only doing sevens, right? Summer is sevens practice, period. That's it. We're not doing 15. Don't come if you don't want to play sevens, right? We're not doing fucking 15s. And even then, the reason why they said that, to my mind, is probably because they were like, we only have X amount of time to do sevens work, right? Sure. So don't come here and fuck up our sevens mojo. So you think about that, you multiply that by 2, right? You have a fall season and a spring season. 36, what's that? That's 72 hours. 72 hours over the course of a year, right? That you essentially have hands on. And obviously, like, people can calculate that amount of time however they want. But you have 72 hours to make somebody better at rugby, That's not even a fucking week, right?
Right.
That's not even a fucking week, right? And
Not a
this is
lot.
and yeah, it's not a lot of time. So it's always going to be what's going to be the greatest return. And so one thing that I would say, I actually now that I think I've gotten you to drink the Kool-Aid, I'll actually probably temper some of the things that I say, right? Some of the things I might be a little bit more measured. Um, but I think when I first when sometimes when I first start talking to people, I want to get so extreme so that like if there's a negotiation, we revert to where I wanted to start from the first place, right? Which is like, you know what I'm saying? So like, like, so my first conversation with someone, a fucking 15-minute job's fucking dumb. You're a fucking idiot if you jog for 15 minutes, right? Now here's the deal: it's like I actually don't believe that, right? I don't believe, but it is. It's like let's do the math. It's like 15. That's half an hour a week. If you spend half an hour a week and you have 4 hours with someone, you've devoted 1/8 of your time to jogging, right? That's not a meaningful like. You're gonna get enough jogging just from practice. You're gonna get enough jogging. Also, like a, a lot of rugby. So okay, I'm trying to think of a way to like describe this. If like someone has some S&C certification, then it's meaningful. If someone doesn't have any S&C certification, it's still meaningful. Sorry, that's me doing an imaginary pyramid in my mind of principles, right? I realize I'm
That's
not
that's
talking with my hand.
gonna be the photo that comes up when you call me from now.
Maslow's,
Yeah.
yeah, uh, yeah. So, but anyway, it's like you always want to look at like whether or not you're like coaching S&C, whether or not you're coaching skills, and I'm probably going to use a couple terms, and I want people to know that they're interchangeable. Like if I say like physical preparation, performance, that is developing the attributes. That's like your speed, your conditioning, your size, your strength, your resiliency to injury, right? And then we'll say over here is skills. Now there is a spectrum in between for sure, right? And but we just kind of designate sort of things one way or the other. And especially when you start getting to into like agility and like cutting, right? That's probably in the middle, right? That's probably in the middle. And then if you even like, especially if you include like reactive cutting, which is reacting to another player in space,
Right.
right? That's pretty solidly in the middle. And so obviously, like at the end of the day, we're here to play rugby, which means you have to have the skill of playing rugby. You have to have good decision making. You have to have ball skills. You have to be able to do the thing. You need to be able to tackle, ruck, counter ruck, scrum, whatever it is, right? But also like having those physical attributes, as we know, makes accomplishing those things a lot easier if you have the right attributes. What happens is that I think and you see this like I don't want to get into like the whole history of like S&C in the world or the US or anything like that. But what happens is coaches tend to, as we kind of discussed in the dry run, coaches tend to really value things that they can measure. And for a long time, very, very fast speed, like things that happen very, very fast, are very difficult to measure, right? So we get measurements where if you're a second off in a Bronco time, who cares? If you're a second off in a 40-yard dash, that's a big deal,
Right.
right? That's a big deal. So you can just see how like a second of error can really, really create a lot of problems depending on what you're measuring. And so like if you look at like the philosophy of science and all this other stuff, I'm going to lose some people. This is my coastal elitism coming out, right? If you look at the philosophy of science, you look at like input errors and like how do you actually know you have meaningful measurements, right? And so because of that, like weight room measurements tend to be they're super easy. They're super easy. And then long distance endurance measurements tend to be super easy. And so because of that, it's very easy to make meaningful measurable changes in those. And because of those, I think people sort of really overvalue those metrics, right? Things that are more difficult to measure would be um, injury rates, like time lost to injury, right? And like at the pro level, you can do it, but man, like D3 rugby, how the fuck would you even start to
Right.
measure time lost to injury? right? It's just so hard, man. And then even speed, like measuring speed tends to require some pretty specialized equipment, right? Like even hand timers have, it's kind of a well-known thing that input error from hand timers creates some issues. Little known fact that if you actually look at like NFL combine times, they actually say, I don't know if they've changed it, but at least for a while, it was like this is a combination of a laser time and a hand time, because when they switched from the hand time to the laser trigger times, everybody had, I was like on average it was like zero point 0.2 was added to their times, and so they had kind of a PR. It's true, they had kind of a PR nightmare on their hands where like, oh my god, all these times are going to come out. How do we explain to fans that not everybody has gotten zero point 0.2 seconds slower in the 40-yard dash, right? That we've
Yeah.
just using better measurements. And
So
instead
you're
of
saying they
explaining
got,
that to
they,
fans,
you're saying that they got slower with the laser measure, with the
yeah,
unbiased,
slower,
right?
slower.
Right. That's how they were actually.
Yeah,
But so it wasn't the lag in reaction time. It was in anticipation, especially if it was your favorite athlete. You would click it
yeah, probably.
a little bit faster, right? So
Yeah.
there's even a little bit of coach's bias in there. It's interesting.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And like this is like I've had S&C coaches. Actually, I haven't had one tell me, but I've definitely heard a couple of my friends who have interned a couple places. They had a coach who he was like, depending on what was going on with the skills coach, he's like, I would definitely fuck around with how accurate I was with the hand timer, because coaches would come in and say like, these are the metrics that we're going to use to evaluate, and the guy would say, this is a fucking dumb metric, and
Right.
we're going to spend all this time. So he had like this whole system. So it's funny, he teaches interns a whole system out of how to trick sport coaches, right? A whole system like this is how you trick sport coaches, right? Because, and this is going to make sense to you, that a lot of sport coaches come in and they're like, "What's the bench press?" Right? And you're like, "Oh, average bench press is 215." Right? And it was like, "Oh, okay. Let's say it's football, right? Let's say it's high school football." And they're like, okay, well, the state champions, their average bench press is 245. So we need to get our bench press 245. And if in a perfect world where bench pressing, all that bench pressing did was improve your bench press, right? Like, yeah, that might be a good goal. I'm sorry, this kind of gets to the next point. This is actually a good
Yeah.
segue.
Go ahead.
But there's always a cost. Like whatever you're doing, there's always going to be a cost to it. There's always going to be secondary consequences. So like jogging for 15 minutes, I don't think that's a bad idea. But if you only have 4 hours a week with someone, right? Jogging for 30 minutes of those is probably not a great use of your time with that person,
Right.
right? If you have X amount of ability to recover, right? We can all, well, like we know this, like you can't train for 8 hours a day straight. Um, it's like if you only have X amount of time to recover, just throwing more train volume at someone is not effective, right? And in fact, can be really, really detrimental. And so there's always a cost associated with whatever activity you want. And so doing like slow submaximal running, there's not, probably the biggest cost in my mind is going to be time, but there's also going to be, you're literally like, depending on how much you push the pace, especially if people want to, especially if people like want to improve, they're like, I want to improve my 2 mile time, right? And so people start improving the 2 mile time. What they're actually doing is, due to the stress of that activity, they're actually causing damage, right? They're causing mechanical damage. There's a big buildup of acid in the body, and that acid literally causes damage. And so you're creating fatigue that you now have to recover from. And it's like, is improving your 75% running speed, is that really going to be the best bang for your buck? And to me, it's like, no, let's improve your 100% running speed. Because as I like to say, no coach has ever said that player is too fast, get him or her off the field. I can't deal with it. I don't have a spot for you. You're too fast.
Right.
No coach has
Right.
ever said that. That's never happened. And the secondary consequence, like, and we could talk about getting big and strong, and make no mistake, for some positions in rugby, like getting big and strong is vitally important, like vitally important. I'm not trying to minimize that at all. Um, but the consequences of getting big and strong, right? Everybody gets bigger and their conditioning goes down, like, or their conditioning goes down. Maybe their conditioning doesn't go down. Maybe their speed goes down, right? They have to run more mass. And so, it's like linemen in the NFL combine have the same, they don't have the same 40-yard dash times as defensive backs and wide receivers, right? They're just bigger. And so again, that's also when you start looking at the components of like what our tests are, right? So it's like when we're evaluating performance, a lot of us tend to look at essentially like strength and conditioning, right? I mean, it's in the title of the profession. Um, but there's other components that go into, there's other physical attributes that go into game day performance. It's just harder to measure. And to my mind, those would be speed and resilience to injury, right? And resilience to injury is really, really hard to measure. That's a lot of good faith, right? That's a
Right.
lot of good faith, and
Difficult
I
to
think for
quantify.
older players, yeah. And there's actually some good, there's good, like a lot of the hardcore sports science research at the doctorate level looks into training loads and injury incidents and stuff like that, right? But obviously, like, there are professional teams that don't have the money to access that, right? I mean, and there's no way, like, there's no amateur team in the US that has access to that, right? So go ahead.
I said, sure.
Yeah. And so anyway, yeah. So from a training perspective, I also want what's going to be give us the return on investment. So like, what's the best use of our time, right? What's going to cause the least amount of fatigue while also giving us the big return. So what's going to improve us the fastest? What's going to give us the biggest improvement without additional fatigue, right? And then also the last part is what can we do that will give us a high return on investment that other teams aren't? And the fact of the matter is I don't know I've never seen an amateur team, maybe other than White River now, that's doing true speed work, period, ever. It doesn't exist. I've never seen it. I have seen, uh, I have seen D1 football programs never do true speed work. I have seen professional teams never do true speed work. And as you know, like, true speed work has high rest times, but if, like, I think the fatigue that's truly caused by it's actually pretty manageable. Um, one of the things that happens with a lot of submaximal effort stuff is, again, you develop a really acidic environment, and you do that day after day after day, and it's really difficult to recover from that. You're really putting yourself in the hole. So I like, again, I gave you a couple different templates, and the one that you picked, I like, because it's like, okay, you're going to get a speed stimulus and maybe a little bit of like upper body hypertrophy, right? Then you're going to get sort of a conditioning stimulus. Then you're going to get like skill stimulus,
Right.
right? And then you're going to rest, and then you're going to repeat. And that's like, great. It's like you're never hammering the same thing too much, too frequently, right? And I'm not hearing, and again, I could be wrong, and this is anecdotal, but one of the things that's very encouraging is I'm not hearing people in the chat talking about how much they're in the hole in terms of fatigue, right? I'm not hearing people say, "Oh my God, I'm getting crushed. I'm dreading
Right.
workouts."
Right.
What's up?
Yeah. So I was mirroring what you were saying. So nobody's going on there saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm too sore. I can't possibly do another workout. Can't make it today. I'm too sore." There's none of that, right?
Yeah, and that's not to say that like being sore is a bad thing. Like, if you're going to lift weights and get big and strong, at some point you're going to experience soreness. But as we've discussed, like, this is a D3 program. You're always going to be looking for numbers, right? If you're going to make people dread coming to something because it's hard and they don't see a benefit, then it's like, fuck, man, you're only going to get the dedicated. You're only going to get the people who are absolutely dedicated day in, day out to everything. And what, I mean, that's going to be one psychopathic 26-year-old, right?
Yeah,
You
you
know,
always have a core group of 5 guys on a team that do that. There's 5 guys that you can throw whatever you want to at them. There's 5
yeah,
guys on a given team that you can do wind sprints for an entire practice because you lost on Saturday, and they'll keep showing up. And they got a masochist streak in them, whatever it is. You've always got
yeah,
this core group of 5 guys, and they're usually in the forward pack, right? And that's good. Every team needs that guy. Everybody needs that ride or die. But you're right. In a D3 environment, I would say in a D2 or even in a D1 environment, if you don't have a good culture, if you don't have an environment that is conducive to return, then your program will suffer long term.
yeah,
So what that means in context, I think, and to apply it to your program, and one of the reasons I'm attracted to it is that it's not like we don't work hard in these workouts. I've been participating in these workouts as well, but I look forward to the next one, and I think the people who are participating do the same thing. And there's specific reasons why I look forward to it. So I've found out over the last, not to get into too much of a detail on my injury, but I had a neck injury, and it affects my balance. And I find that when my lactic acid buildup is too high, usually from playing too much touch, maybe I ride the bike too long, or just doing just too much exercise, then the neck seizes up, and I get vertigo, and I just get symptoms, right? I get the symptoms of somebody with an incomplete spinal cord injury. So, and under your program, I don't have that, but I'm still like, I track my own speed, and even my slow get gas is getting faster, right? So
that's
you have
awesome.
the results. Yeah, right. So you have the results, and you have the satisfaction. Like, I'm still soaking wet at the end of the program, and I put all kinds of reels out on Instagram, and you can see guys are busting their ass. And there are times that I still throw, like, tire flips isn't in your program, but I throw it in there anyway, because I know that there are some recently graduated high schoolers or kids that are in the middle of college or whatever that are going to want those kinds of things. So I take that discretion in doing that. And there's probably a million scientific reasons why you'd tell me that I'm a fucking idiot for doing it, but I'm going to keep doing it because you're not here. So, but
what that was like such a, like, well, you're not here, Dad, so you can't tell me what to do.
you're goddamn right.
Mom
But yeah,
said you had me on weekends. Mom said you had me on weekends, and you didn't come.
So yeah, there was I'm spacing on the guy's name, but there was an S&C coach who was on Rogan, and he was talking about his approach to strength and conditioning is you don't want, if you totally exhaust somebody in the first, let's say, 5 exercises, the likelihood of them continuing that program just statistically go down through the floor, right? So you intentionally cut the session short, or you intentionally cut the intensity short, such that the participant feels like they didn't do quite enough.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that was Andy Galpin. I'm pretty sure that was Andy Galpin who said that. Who's a brilliant S&C coach out of Cal State Fullerton. I know he's been on Rogan. I love his stuff. Great guy. Yeah. Yeah. That's a wonderful point.
So this program kind of smacks of that a little bit, because, you know, the leg day in particular, and maybe that I'm just saying this as I've been playing front row for a long time, so you have to get a pretty rigorous leg day for me to really be exhausted from it. But it is comparatively not as intense. But I'm still throwing around the same weight that I would otherwise be throwing around. So, and again, I've been way more consistent with this program, and I would say this for Nick Valentine too, who's he's my 2, and sometimes he plays 1 or 3. He comes out to way more exercises than he did in spring, and I'm able to sustain this way more frequently as well. And so the concept, this guy Andy, I think you're right. I think that was his name, but it's, if you look at a year, instead of looking at how much effort do you get in week by week by week, you look at a total year's worth of effort, a total year's worth of work. To your point, we have 36 hours in a spring season, right? And so this 8-week or 8-week preseason S&C program we got going, you only have so much effort. So if you had a player that only did that for 4 weeks and then quit because he got an injury or was intermittently not showing up to the workouts because it's all voluntary, and his thighs are sore from the previous day or 2 days ago, then your total amount of work is right. It would have been better to reduce the intensity of it. It's a really interesting deal because I think it's contrarian to the orange theories and not to disparage anybody again, because there's different strokes, right? But when you look at blast the music really loud and you're doing power cleans until you throw up, or spinning class and you're just exhausted. Yeah, but how much work are you actually doing during that whole program? And what does that look like when you measure it across 100 participants, 50 participants, and then take that same set of people or a representative sample of that same set of people and have them do something that's less intense? How much total work got done? So anyway, this whole program smacks of that to me, like deliberately truncate the intensity or the frequency so that they want to keep coming back.
Yeah, there should be and you may the conditioning days, like the T2 days, right? Sort of the field conditioning days, we can call those. Those are the closest to true conditioning. There's a lot of discretion in there. You know what I'm saying? I put a lot of discretion in there because it's man, someone like Nick Valentine or you doing that is going to be very different than someone like Horseshoe doing that, right? Because you guys are just different sizes, right? It's not the same stimulus. To give you guys the same exercises, it's I can't kick the ass of the forwards. I can't just beat the shit out of forwards because they had the unfortunate misfortune of playing the big boy positions, right? It's that's not fair, right? It's not fair. And by the same token, it's not fair to collar somebody because they're 160 pounds and can go forever. And so one of the interesting things about the sprints is so let me go through a couple points real quick. Absolutely. I love that. I hadn't heard Andy Galpin say that, but it sounds like Andy Galpin. It's a wonderful point. I would absolutely say that's an intention of mine. Remember, we discussed, for those who haven't seen it, in the Dry Run podcast, consistency versus performance, right? And it was man, if I can just get good, consistent efforts, I don't need game day's probably going to kick your ass no matter what, right? Even at this level, honestly, even at this level, you can still get your shit kicked in, right? Even at D3,
right,
you could still have, you could absolutely just have a rough game and it fucking sucks, right? And it's hot and numbers are low and your buddy's hungover and you want to fucking puke, right? That, worst case scenarios do happen. They still happen on game day. And so it's kind of one of those things where it's well, if you're getting significant minutes, then you're getting kind of that acidic effect just from gameplay, right? And so, I've created some in-season workouts and I'll send those to you soon as well. But yeah, it's kind of hey man, in practice, it's think of every practice sucks right? If every practice is super intense, if you have 2 hours on Tuesday of just like shit kicking work, 2 hours on Thursday of shit kicking work, and then you have a game, that's 6 hours. That's 6 hours that week where you just got fucking beat down. That's probably too much. That's probably too much for a non-professional athlete, right?
Right.
Like that's
Sure.
probably too much even. Yeah, that's probably too much even for a collegiate athlete, to be honest, right? Like there's probably not many collegiate athletes unless they're true endurance athletes that can do that. And so again, yeah, it's like, hey, how do I make sure I get a good effort? And then you're like, if like, oh, so this is one thing too that I did with the players, right? And I did this to get a lot of buy-in, is when I started measuring sprint times, guys would say, oh, I caught my breath, I'm ready to go again. And I would say, you're not ready to go again. And they would say, fuck you, who the fuck do you think you are? No, I mean, I'm exaggerating, but like, but I could tell they thought I was full of shit, right? Like, and why wouldn't I be? They've never had a coach who's like, no, man, we're just going to chill out for 3 minutes. We're just going to fucking chill, joke around, fuck around. I don't care. Like, what coach has ever said that in their life? I'm like, none. No coach has ever said that. Like, do whatever you want. No, 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 no. Work less. No, you need to rest more, work less. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, what coach has said that? I remember we had sprints and Chappie was doing wall sits, and I was like, don't do wall sits. Recover completely, right? And then when we started measuring things, people started seeing that I was right. People started saying like, oh shit, I thought I was fully recovered and I'm not. I'm actually not recovered. And I was like, see, so you're not actually getting that speed stimulus, right? You're literally still even though it doesn't feel like that, you're still dealing with that acidic environment. You're still like lactate shuttling, right? You're still doing all these other things where you're still recovering. Like, and it doesn't feel that way, but you're still recovering. And we literally have the data to show you,
Yeah.
right? That you're still recovering because you ran slower, and it's laser timed. It's not subjective. It is, you know what I'm saying? It's not. It's like, yeah, listen, man, you just fucking ran slow. Sorry, there's nothing like you can't argue against that. And so I think that's when people started buying into the idea of complete rest, right? Because yeah, if you look at those speed days, you're like, this is not a lot of volume of training. You
Right.
know, it's like you look at like total meters run, and it's, I don't know, it's like 200 meters, something like that. You know, it's like not a high volume of training, but hopefully of that, you've gotten truly 50 meters of absolute, true, pure speed work, right? Like
Right.
true speed work where you're moving absolutely as fast as possible. And there's no other time and place you're going to get that, right? You know, if you're doing repeat sprints, that means you're getting that the first time, and that's it. That's fucking it. That's it. You're never. That means like if you're doing repeat, and as we know, right? This is one thing that I always will. So when I work with youth athletes in the private sector, I'd always tell them, I said, we do not do conditioning, right? You do not do conditioning. I know strength and conditioning is in the title of my job, but you and I will not do conditioning because your sport coach is going to have you do conditioning. And the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is if you're beat up, if you're tired, you're going to hide. I know you do it. I did it. You will continue to do it. I will continue to do it. Right. So, like, as players, we knew, like, this, like, we all fucking like, oh, fuck, the hammer's coming down, man. And so it's like, yeah, if you have repeat sprints and you're the big boy group, you're like,
Yeah. You're
boys,
just gonna
let's
phone in the
fucking,
first
yeah.
one. If you know you got 5
Yeah,
sprints,
exactly.
that first sprint
Yeah.
ain't gonna be your hardest sprint.
Yeah. Yeah.
No
And
way.
and
No
I
way.
mean, yeah, no fucking way, because you have 5 of those with like 10 seconds rest. It's going to be brutal. Oh, hold on one second. Right. So anyway, so that happens too. It's that like people manage their energy 100%. Players are good survivors. Like we are. Like players are good survivors. It's a brutal sport, right? Practice is tough. Game day is tough. So it's like, yeah, if you have 5 sprints and you're going to get incomplete rest. Fuck, that first one. How many times have you done this? How many times? Fuck, boys. All right, let's go easy on the first one. Don't make anybody look bad, right? Don't fucking make any.
Yeah.
You said that?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll tell you, so when I became a coach, that's one of the issues with like workers that then become managers or players that then become coaches is that right? You can
Yeah.
see that. So you're like, I know what you're doing, motherfucker. But also I have the empathy, right? But one thing that I learned from there's a book by Ben Ryan called Seven's Heaven. It was about when Ben Ryan coached the Fijian sevens team to winning the Olympics. And he had talked about all these Fijian athletes that are naturally, like, when you see them on the pitch, you can see what they actually do, but in training they're doing sprints and they're just slow as shit, right? Like unbelievably slow. And he didn't have all the speed gates and all the fancy stuff that he had when he was at England, but and I forget who gave him this idea, but he had players chase each other. He turned it into a competition, and then all of a sudden the actual performance, what they can actually do, what their actual 100% is.
Yeah.
That's what you see. So on 100-meter sprints at the end of practice, which I know you hate, but fuck you, you're not here. Is I have players chase each other, right? Because you don't want to get caught. You don't want the guy behind you to catch you. And then if he does catch you, you don't want it to happen again, right?
Yeah.
But even then, it's usually 100 meters down. And then if I'm feeling particularly sadistic that day, then I'll have them do 100 meters back. And if they know they're going down and back, the first one is like, I don't need a stopwatch to know that, like, I can see them. I can see them, like, looking back at the guy that's going to chase them and be like, hey, can you, like, we got to go back. Can you not? I don't want Jeff to see.
Yeah.
So,
you're just not, and like that is smart fatigue management. Like, coaches always try to. I have had so many coaches try to coach around that, and the fact of the matter is you're never going to do it. You're never like you get in the hole so fast doing maximal efforts, right? Again, you get in the hole so fast doing maximal efforts, so you need a tremendous amount of rest for actual true maximum effort, right? So if you want to increase the ceiling, if you want to get the ceiling higher and you want true maximum efforts, you actually need a fuck ton of rest. And you need that day of, and then you actually probably need that over the course of a year. And I love the fact that you brought up a year, right? Because we get so attached as coaches, we often get so attached to one individual workout where it's like, okay, like, I get it, it's 36 hours, that's not a lot of time, but let's break up the total number of workouts, right? Let's say you work out 45 days a week, right? Like, let's say it's just a random player works out 45 days a week. And let's say they work on average 2.5 times. So that would be 90 plus 22. So it'd be like 112. We'll say 112 workouts in a year. It's fine. And if you have one or two great ones, honestly, that's probably not the difference maker either. Right? It's like, yeah, man. And so again, we talked about consistency versus performance. I want consistency. I want consistency so badly, right? I want that guy. Like, you can't tell me again, it's like, how many times have we seen where, like, fucking lifting just fucking sucks and numbers just fucking drop, and you get 5 fucking psychopaths who show up to every lifting session and the rest of the team doesn't, and then 2 of those 5 psychopaths get hurt. It's right. So again, I'm not trying to, it's like, and I think the wonderful thing really is like, dude, you showed me those touch numbers. It's fucking Thursday in July, right? And I saw how many players were on that field. That's fucking awesome. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's fucking awesome. Like, not to throw shade to other teams, but I know for a fact I know because I'm sure there are teams in season that can't get that shit together.
Hey, hang on. I want to show you. So I wish I could flip this camera around, but now that, because rugby's right, so everybody shows up late. So that's what it looks like.
Holy shit. Holy shit.
What's up, Shane? Say hi to Jesse. Yeah.
That's fucking sick.
Yeah. So
that's fucking sick. That's fucking sick. So
I'll
again,
tell you,
yeah, I mean, to me as a coach, especially for, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say that. So the reason that so we went to this tournament in Fort Wayne, and Fort Wayne has an amazing program, and the guys like to they hate Fort Wayne because they ain't them, right? They hate them because they ain't them. That's really what it is. And they would say,
Yeah.
"Oh, they're so arrogant, conceited, blah blah blah." It's like, no, they're not. If you talk to any of those guys individually, Sam's an amazing dude. Like every player I've talked to individually, just like us, they're just good dudes. They're out there. They're trying to get after it. They're trying to build a program up. That's us in 3 years. That's really what it is. That's what I aspire to, and I think we can really get there. And they win games because they have the bench strength, right? They had a team that was called the Altar Boys, and it was the older players.
If you can hear me. Sorry, 1 second. I need to plug in my phone because it's going to die, but my earphones are in, so I can hear you. So go ahead. Tell me about the Altar Boys. Go ahead. Tell me about the Altar Boys.
So they had this team as a social side called the Altar Boys that they put up against us, and we brought, not to make excuses for the river here, but we brought a young side, graduated high school players, college players who are just trying to get a little bit of rugby in before they go back to school. And we did pretty well, I thought. And we played this team, and we were a couple of tries up. This is a 10s match, 2 10-minute matches. And in the last 5 minutes, they threw in, they just had a stronger bench than we did. I brought 20 kids with me, and they had 70 on the sideline, right? And of those 70, they had some massive dudes. They had some motherfuckers on that team. And you know why? Because they have a better program, because they have a good culture, because people want to be a part. We're talking about Fort Wayne, Indiana. Like, it used to be the capital, but it's not Indianapolis. Demographically, they shouldn't, like, we should have that program, but they do because they have their fucking shit together. Right? Yeah. And so they win games because they have a better program, right? That's really what it is. They have a better program than us. And I think that's great. And I aspire to be that way. I want to be like them. That's what the Dead Fish Society is about. It's as much of a carbon copy of the Black and Blue Society as I could possibly do, because I see, okay, if you get some Fort Wayne old boys who can't play anymore but still want to be a part of the program, that gives them a job to do, which is totally indicative of the culture we have here at River. It's like, come one, come all, you're all welcome. Even the guys that can't play anymore, even the guys that are injured or otherwise can't boot up on a regular basis, you're still useful, and here's how you can be, right? You can spend $50 a year to be a part of this Black and Blue Society, and you can help us put on some clinics, and you can help us do some philanthropy, and so on and so forth. And that's what I'm emulating with the Dead Fish Society. It's the same shit. So I guess my point is that, tying it back into S&C or even touch that we're running today, I think there's the workouts, and the workouts being inviting and exciting. That's great. But you got to have the social aspect to it too. And I think maybe that's where some trainers, some strength and conditioning coaches fall short. I think the do you have what it takes mentality is good for a certain group of people, but I think there's lots of folks that get missed whose lives could otherwise be improved by having you're welcome in whatever form you're in, right? Just keep coming back out. Don't even worry about it. And that's easier said than done. And even if there's even gyms and fitness programs that say that, but that's not what the actual culture is. When you actually, Planet Fitness is a great example of that. They got no lunks, right? That's their whole thing, no lunks. And I think it depends from Planet Fitness to Planet Fitness. But I've heard anecdotes, not to disparage Planet Fitness, because they've got a really good company that they run, but I've heard anecdotes from rugby players of people who go to Planet Fitness who otherwise weren't into a lot of S&C to begin with. And there are lunks there. it's just a lump by a different name, and they feel the judgment, and people give them weird looks in the locker room, and they don't go back. And that's just the bare minimum, just like being accepted. But then if you also add in a layer of like true camaraderie, if you add in a layer of the social aspect, like let's go out and get beers afterwards. If you're not a drinker, like just come hang out with us in the clubhouse or whatever, then even if you're not really particularly good at the workouts, you keep showing up anyway. And then a year goes by and you're down 20 pounds and you feel like $1 million, or even if you haven't seen that much results, you're still exercising on a day-to-day basis and your mental health is better. So my point is I think even in fitness programs, I think the culture piece of it is easily ignored, and it's and too much of a focus is on the S&C, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so when we were all training together in late winter, early spring, I think there were like 2 or 3 times I literally just told somebody to sit down. I was like, just go sit down. I'm sorry for those. I meant that like, hey, just relax, just chill out. It's okay. It's just relax, right? Like none of this matters. It's okay. Like just breathe. Yeah, just take a seat, recoup, join us when you're ready. And if somebody came in and they were injured, yeah, man, thanks for coming in. Thanks for being here. Right? Do what you can. Thanks for being here. Like we'll see what we can get done. But like, don't stress. Don't stress, man. Don't stress. Right? And I actually found out that one player, I don't want to throw them under the bus, and I don't want, if for some reason they come across this, I don't want it to seem critical of them. I actually take pride in what they said. They were like, apparently through the grapevine, they were like, oh, Jesse tells me to take it easy all the time. And they were perhaps a little insulted by that. And I was like, I don't mean it as an insult, man. I'm literally like, it's fine. I'm not judging you. I'm not patronizing you. I'm literally not. It's fine. like I started playing rugby at 37, right? I'm 39 now. If I didn't protect myself, like I can't tell you, like started playing college lacrosse at 34, right? Like if I didn't protect myself, even playing tennis, man, going from no tennis volume to a full collegiate program of tennis volume.
Tennis is
34.
Insane.
Yeah, like people could like, man, I fucking had some horrible Achilles tendinosis. I almost broke a bone in my hand right from the repeated impact. Like I absolutely had to protect myself. And I was very lucky that I had a coach who was very understanding, because I was like, help me, I'm old, right? And he fucking got it, because I was like, bro, like I'm minimum 10 years younger than the next, or 10 years older than the next player, right? So I want people, like, for me, I'm really grateful that I was able to start playing rugby at 37, right? Like that I'd wanted to play for years and circumstances conspired against me. And so like I want somebody who comes in, man, if they're like 30 years old and they're like, I haven't played a sport in 10 years, I'm like, man, I still want you to be able to participate. And maybe you won't get on the field this year, right? Like maybe that's not safe. And maybe you're not going to do the same thing other people do, but I still want you to be able to participate, and I still want you to be able to say like, hey, in 2 or 3 years I could be a starter. Right? It's going to take time. Like it's going to take time, and you should be safe, and you should get good, and all that, all that other like corny bullshit, and which is true. But like, I want that person to be able to show up and say like, hey man, we're not going to hurt you in the 2 years. It's going to take 2 years to get there, but we're going to make sure you don't get hurt. We're going to make sure that you're as safe as possible, that you're improving as possible. And in the meantime, people are going to be stoked that you're here, right? Because bodies are bodies, 100%. Man. Bodies are bodies. Bodies are bodies. Like fuck, bodies are bodies. And that's something that's like so fucking important with these teams, where it's like bodies are bodies.
Yeah.
You cannot have.
And I think, bodies are bodies, but I don't I don't necessarily see it that way. It's true that bodies are bodies, that stronger numbers always bode better for a program. And that's totally true. And they pay their dues and they tell other people, and that's all functionally great. I don't really care about any of that. What I care about is that person's life being a little bit better because they're involved in the program. Right? Like Jake Young. I don't think he'd mind me bringing him up. You know, he'd never really played rugby before. He travels from fucking Martinsville up here, which is an hour commute.
Yeah.
Right? And he's got a lot of work
Boy
to
is
do.
a
We
true
know he
believer.
does. Right? But he loves it up here, and he loves us, and he gets on the chat, and everybody loves hearing from him. And his life is better because he's a part of White River. That's all I care about.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point.
Like,
yeah.
So, you know, the score will take care of itself, right? Like, if you just focus on just making people feel welcome, not because that's another person you can add to the roster and that's a better program, but just because that person should feel welcome because they're a person and they deserve that kind of initial treatment, then the rest of it takes care of itself. The numbers take care of themselves. All you got to worry about is just being fucking decent to people and being welcoming.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's an absolutely great point. That we've had this conversation before too, and it goes to sort of any sports where it's like, man, practice and game day. Like if you're an average adult, right, and like obviously this is going to skew a little bit younger because of kids and all that stuff, but like, man, if you're an average 27-year-old, you have a million better things you could be doing than going to rugby practice, right? So like rugby practice better be like the best part of your fucking day.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, that's why workouts can't fucking suck. Right. Like they can be hard. Like make no mistake, workouts can be hard. That's okay. But they can't suck. You can't sit there and tell a 27-year-old who has a million options about what he can fucking do with his disposable income. Right. That like
right.
you're
right.
no, it's true, man. And you can't tell the dad who's 35 and has 2 kids and a wife who's like, why the fuck are you playing rugby? Right? You said we were going to my sister's this weekend, right? Like you can like you have to make that such a fun experience that they're like, no, babe, bring the kids. It's gonna be sick, right? Like you have to make that such a positive experience for those people, right? That like they want to be there. And so again, when I joined the team, I felt very welcome. Like people were nice as shit, right? And it's like credit to rugby. I think rugby is one of the friendlier sports I've encountered. But obviously, some teams are less than welcoming. Some teams are very welcoming. And yeah, I think especially, I think you're right, which is like long term, you want the most welcoming program. You want the program that has the biggest impact. And I guess for me, because I'm always so like, what's the result? What's the return on investment, right? Like that there, how do you not have the greatest return on investment if you do that, right? Like how do you like you have a meaningful impact in people's lives they want to continue to support, and it's like, well, then it becomes a better experience for you too as a player and coach or somebody who's participating with the team. It's a better experience, right? People want to be there, right? Like I think of like, man, the socials in the spring were fucking sick. They were fucking sick. Like people had such a nice time, right? Like, and I'm not even talking about just like people wilding out or anything like that. I mean, like it was just like a really pleasant way to spend a Saturday afternoon and evening, right? Like it was just like, and it was like, I remember, what was it? The first game that got rained out, right? Like actually truly, because it was fucking, and that field was rough. And I know.
I still would have played it.
Up?
I still would have had everybody.
Yeah, I know.
Peyton had to be the president and just be like, Jeff, sit down. Like, I'm going to be the adult today. That's pretty much what happened. Because it was like literally ankle deep in water. And I was like, let's go. Like, what are we waiting on? The referee's like, I don't know about this. And then Peyton stepped in and was like, no, we're not doing this. Yeah. So
what happened? A bunch of kids still booted up, played touch for half an hour, right? And like that's how much people wanted to be there. You know what I'm saying? Like think about that, where it's like game day got canceled and boys were like, we're gonna wear fucking new uniforms, we're gonna boot up, we're gonna play touch for 30 minutes, right? And like, and then we're gonna just kill some beers, right? And like
Yeah.
it was a great day. It was a great day, even though the game didn't happen, it was still a great day. And I think that's a credit to the program. I think that's a credit to you, and I think that's a credit to the boys, which is like, hey man, that was still a really nice day. It was still a really good experience. And so like, it's okay. It's okay that a game didn't get played that day. Because
Right.
to me, it was like still a really, really meaningful experience for the team. Right.
Yeah.
And there were so many people there. Great.
One of my favorite rugby days was that day for sure. We got to got to reveal the clubhouse, and none of it went the way I wanted it to, but it was like you say, it was still just a great experience. So yeah, no, I agree. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I'm in it for, is that kind of stuff. Like we've said this over and over to each other, but like, you know, I can probably count on one hand the amount of memories that I really have on the field, right? All the rest of it is from off the pitch type stuff. And so that's what I focus on, right? And we're winning more games and we're recruiting better athletes, although that's not my focus at all. And we're more importantly improving the athletes that we have. But it's all, and I say like the whole White River board, it's just the whole team in general. It's an organic thing where all we're trying to do is just support each other and just build a good culture. If you just focus on the culture, at least at the D3 level, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Then everything's going to go our way.
Well,
As naive as that sounds.
so there is such a strong emphasis as someone who has worked in high performance sports, both like Power 5 football and professional sports. Even at the highest level, culture is talked about so much. Like people spend a tremendous amount of time talking about culture. I will say this, that in my experience, people also don't do a great job of defining culture, right? And then they also sort of want a culture that it's like, what do you have to define your key performance indicators, right? And for a team like us, our key performance indicators are like what is a meaningful experience for players. And I get that it's not measurable, but a good proxy is like, hey, how many people are still here after 3 or 4 years? How many players say, hey man, I had a great fucking time, I'm bringing my buddy, and then their buddy shows up and their buddy becomes a player? How many
Right.
players do you get like Jake who are like, no man, I'm driving up. This is such a fucking meaningful part of my fucking day that I'm driving up multiple times a week. What, fucking hour and a half during the
Yeah.
day?
Insane.
I mean, something nuts where he's like, no, but it's great. This is the best part of my day. Like that's fuck yeah, man. Fuck yeah. That's sick. Fuck yeah. So to me, it's like, yeah, what is your culture actually promoting? What are you trying to get across? And I've been in a lot of places where the culture was like, we're going to be tougher than everybody. We're going to outwork everybody. We're going to do all this other bullshit, right? And then we got our asses kicked. And then practice would be fucking miserable, and our coach would run us into the ground, right? And it was like, okay, so really, all you're getting is just the fucking psychopaths who don't want this. That's it. Like that's it. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And in 2 years, no one's gonna fucking remember our games anyway. Like in 2 years, no one's gonna fucking remember our schedule. Right? Like no
Well,
one's gonna
and
fucking remember this.
there was the book Legacy. It's a book about the All Blacks and how they design their program and everything. And they talk about when you're at the top, that's when you need to be cognizant of the impending fall. And I'm butchering this quote, right? But
Yeah.
the point is that I think teams can. I think you're right that you have to be able to at least somewhat document and be clear on what kind of culture you want to have. Begin with the end in mind, right? a Stephen Covey quote, but also at some point, at least in rugby organizations, you get to a point where your culture has built up a program well enough that then the arrogance sets in, right? So you build up a culture, you start winning more games, and at some point the temptation of staying on top becomes more important than the developing individual people and improving individual people's lives, which was the foundation of how your program was built in the first place. And there's we all run in the same circles at the D3 level. And so there's a team that I won't mention, but there's several people who tell me that, they're kind of at the top, and now there's kind of this mentality of like, okay, we've invited all these people, that's great, but now it's time to actually get down to business. And so there was a fundamental shift in their culture, and now it's more of a, do you have what it takes, right? And that's difficult because at some point, if you're going to elevate your game and you have to compete at a higher level, then things like recruiting and selection, especially if you have a good problem of having way more numbers than you do the starting 23, which is the problem we have this fall, then how do you do that while still maintaining that culture? And I don't really have an answer to that, but I do know that I want to avoid that. And I think this legacy book talks about, the first thing that you can do is just recognize that that's a thing, that once you see success, the inevitability, unless you do something to change it, is that you're going to then fail. And kind of a recentering or an adjustment on how you go about running things is important in that moment. Whenever you get to the top, your next destination is the bottom, unless you do something in advance to change it. So
Yeah.
It's just a thought I had about that. So I think that, like I was saying, S&C programs have, I think lots of S&C programs, and I'm not just talking about sports related S&C programs. I'm talking about any place you go to where it's like a group exercise environment.
Yeah.
A lot of them are missing any kind of culture element at all. It's like show up, nobody really knows each other, or if they do, they're getting to know each other. There's no facilitation from the coaches or from the gym owner or whatever to do that. And I think that they otherwise would have a better program if they just focused on actually being a positive influence in their lives. And I'm not telling you to do this. I'm saying this from personal experience. So there was this guy, Dave Randolph, in Louisville, who he's real big into kettlebells and stuff, and he does sleds and some other things. And I mentioned this in our dry run that once I started working with him, my game as a rugby player went way, way, way up. And I up until then, I was squatting, 315, 3x10, about that kind of weight. I was doing a lot of power cleans, snatches, stuff like that. And then all that went out the window. It was just kettlebells, right? And I was a way better rugby player to boot, probably because I kept showing up. Whereas before I would do my weightlifting and then maybe take a few days off, and I kind of was on this yo-yo. I'd get fat and then I would train a little bit and get back. But with Dave's program, I love dogs, and he had 2 dogs that were just there all the time. So I just would show up because of Hope and Cash. Like, they were cute and I wanted to pet them, and they would show up, and that was great. But then also the people were really good. And then him and Cheryl would have like these little, dinners, and they were big into keto. So they would like cook keto food and everybody could get together. And so they facilitated some of this cultural piece of it. right? And so then you just got to meet all these people, and then you wanted to show back up because that was your group, right? That was your tribe. So there's my pitch to anybody listening who's trying to organize a strength and conditioning or any kind of fitness program that's group based, is there should be, in my opinion, a social aspect to it. That and
Oh, yeah.
I think you should just focus on being a positive, like don't focus on, okay, if I do this, here's how many clients I'm going to get out of it. Just that's all great. Running a business is essential
Yeah.
for our economy, but you should, if you just focus on making that person feel good in some kind of group setting. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox about it.
No. So this is actually something that I always tell my interns and the person when, because I've done a fair amount of personal training, right? And I probably made 3 times as much money doing personal training as I ever did working in high performance sport. No, actually, probably like 10 times. Now I'm doing like the math in my head. I probably made 10 times as much money doing personal. There's no money to be made in high performance sport unless you're at a very high level. So one of the things that I always tell my interns, and I said, people will sign up with you for a bunch of different reasons, but they're only going to, and I can't take credit for this. There's a guy named Pat Davidson who said this, and I've kind of modified it a little bit, but if somebody else listening to this knows somebody who said it before Pat, then I'm wrong. But there are only 3 reasons a client in the personal training setting will continue to train with you. Right? And I'll say the most impolite one first. They want to have sex with you, right? They want to look like you, right? They want to look like you as number 2, or they want to hang out with you as number 3.
Yeah.
No one's going to continue training with you if they don't want to do those things. So if there's any like aspiring SNC coaches or personal trainers, I doubt it. But if any of you guys are listening to this, like know that like people are not going to continue to work with you long term if they don't enjoy your company, if they don't think you're an aspirational goal from a fitness standpoint, or they don't want to sleep with you. Right? That's it. Right? Like that is why people continue to train. Right? So like you have to make your clients feel good in some way or another about training with you, because there are trainers fucking everywhere, right? Now there's plenty of clients, but there's also a lot of trainers, right? There's a lot, and it's not hard to find a trainer. It's really not that hard, right?
Yeah.
And so even when it comes to how that comes to like team sessions, it's like, hey, listen, man, like people can be there. That probably that first one, people want to have sex with you. That's probably less true, but either people want to get better, right? They enjoy your coaching, or they enjoy the social aspect, right? Like long term, right? People are just not going to eat fucking shit over and over and over again unless there's something incredibly intrinsically, unless they want something really, really bad from that experience, right? And so again, like you said, like workouts can't be like we've all just eaten shit in workouts and been like, hell yeah, because we did that, with our brothers, figuratively speaking, and we survived and it was a great experience or something like that.
Right.
But honestly, like that is that can be game day, right? That can actually be game day. And then B, how many times a week can you do that? How many times a week can you do that to somebody who has a job, who has a spouse with kids, right?
Exactly.
Not that many. How many times a month can you do that? You can probably do that once or twice a month. And that's probably about it. Like, in addition to a game day, like out of season, you can probably do that once a week, and in season, you could probably do it twice a month in addition to game days, and that's probably about it. Where it's like, yeah, you're gonna just fucking eat shit, and it's gonna be fucking miserable, and you're gonna consistently get people who are like, yeah, that was fun, let's do it again, right?
Right.
Like, can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait for tomorrow.
It depends on what you're trying to do, right? So, and I said this last time too, but I made that mistake. I was a pretty wrathful coach. I kind of had an anger problem, and I would just lose my fucking shit on my athletes when they weren't doing what I had clearly coached them to do over and over and over again, or that's what I thought, right?
Yeah.
And the hard lesson that I learned was, one, anything that you say, well, take this podcast for example. For the people that actually listen to it in its entirety, which is going to be like fucking 3 people, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Shout out to my mom.
yeah. You know, maybe in 10 years when people go back and they're like, wow, they're so rich and famous and they're the best podcaster.
Yeah. Those D3
Look
rugby
at the early
misses.
stuff. But my
Yeah.
point is that nobody, even if they watch it in their entirety, nobody's going to retain it all. Nobody's going to listen to every little last bit of it. And I don't, why would a coach be so arrogant? And I was this guy. Just want to reiterate that. Like, why would a coach be so arrogant as to think that every one of your athletes, you got 30 guys showing up to practice, 40 guys showing up to practice, every last one of them is going to pay attention to everything you teach them for 2 hours? There's no fucking way. There's no way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Just make peace with it. So I have a little rule. If there's something that I really, really want people to retain, I have to tell everybody 7 times before I'm confident that everyone's heard it once.
That's fair. That's a good rule.
Right? But what that means is now the team's only heard this once. I've harped on it for 7 sessions, and now the team's actually heard it once. Right?
Yeah.
So this last season, it was basic head-on tackling technique. This is a D3 rugby team, and I've got guys that are brand new at rugby, right? So go in, knee under nuts, cheek to cheek, wrap and drive, just the basic shit. I just turned it into an acronym that we would just repeat. And I bet you there's still players out there that couldn't repeat that acronym to me, right? So that was the lesson I had to learn, was that kind of everybody is going to pay for this mentality. You have a loss or players aren't paying attention, so we're just going to do fitness. The only person that benefits, even in the, well, it doesn't benefit anybody, but the only person that even makes them feel better is the coach. I mean, you might as well just be yelling at the trees. Like, you're not doing anything. There is literally no utility. Now, that being said, I have a mentor that's a really high level coach compared to me. And he would beg to differ on a case by case basis. He would say that there are some players, you have to know who you're talking to, right? You got to know your audience. And there are some players who need that kick in the ass, right? And that's probably true. I think Connor is probably one of those players. Connor Dills. He responds better when I'm a little rough with him. But I've just learned the hard way, man. I've been running sessions long enough as a coach since college, and had 6 guys show up to practice, and it's like, well, what the fuck are we gonna do now? Like, I had this whole session prepared, but nobody's showing up because I made everybody run lines the Monday before, and everybody said, fuck that, I'm not doing it. 22 years old, and I'm gonna go drink beer, hang out with my girlfriend. So.
Yeah.
So.
Or it's like, if I'm gonna like do something that horrible and shitty, I'll just go do like a fucking marathon or an obstacle course race, or like, it's like, hey, I'm here to play rugby, not get yelled at, or like, and again, I think your mentor is right. You got to know your audience, right? But I'll see this, that like, even at the professional level, like, one of the things that distinguish a lot of those pros, one thing that distinguished pros from even high level collegiate athletes that I noticed is, at least when it came to on the pitch behavior, pros tended to do a really, really good job of identifying their mistakes, right? And so
Pros
it was like, they're
what you cut out there.
identifying their mistakes.
Oh, Right.
their own mistakes. Yeah, pros would absolutely like identify their own mistakes. They would like, and I'm not to say like that's not to say that you wouldn't see people blow up or anything like that. But it was like after the game was after the game, right? After the game was that was it. That was fucking it. Game was over. Great, let's go have some beers, right? That was pros. Like maybe maybe Monday it was time to get chewed out a little bit or something like that. But like after the game was after the game. That was it. That Saturday night, that Sunday, whatever it was, that was sacred, right? like
Yeah.
nobody's gonna fucking sit
Right.
there and talk about the game. And like, yeah, I
Right. Well,
absolutely like
and to
some
your
people.
point, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, to your point, that the players, they already know, right? They already, like you said, they identify their own mistakes. Like, you still got to coach them, but you got to pick your moments. And if a player screws up in the middle of a match, that's not the time to come down on them. They already know what they did. To your point, if they're a good athlete, they already
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
they're doing. So,
And if they
sorry, go
don't know,
ahead.
why are you yelling at them?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
like there's no like if they don't. So well, I mean, one of the things that I've always tried to do, and it's tough, even for me as a coach, is like if something doesn't make sense to me, right? And I actually have learned this working a lot with kids. Let's just ask them. I say, what's going on, right? I'm asking you to do this, and you're doing this. And here's the important part: is if you ask this question, you have to be sincere. You have to be it has to be a sincere question, right? Otherwise, you're just
Yeah.
tricking the player to be vulnerable and then punishing them for it, right? But it's like, why are you not doing what I'm telling you? Is there a miscommunication? Are you something else going on? Right? You know what I'm saying? Like I have had and again I tend to talk about my own experiences, right? And I have been told by multiple teammates and coaches that I often come across as extremely lackadaisical in practice, right? That I come across as somebody who doesn't care, that I come across as somebody who's not giving his effort, right? I come across as someone who's grumpy. And I actually wouldn't say any of those are true. I wouldn't say any of those are true. I would say that is my way of focusing, right? I get very focused. I tend to get very quiet, right? And I tend to try to preserve energy as much as possible because the fact of the matter is the average age is 10 years younger than me and they've all played rugby 10
Yeah.
times longer than I have, right? So it's like that's just my survival technique, right? And if somebody came up and said, hey, what's going on? I would have said, I'm just focused, right? Like I'm trying to learn plays that people have been running for 10 years, right? Or 5 years or even 4. You know what I'm saying? It was like, no, it's for real.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, an overs unders line, like fuck, man, an overs underline is still pretty new to me compared to most players. It's like that's fucking basic shit, right? And it's like, and some things make sense to me and some don't. But it's like, yeah, man, I'm literally just in my head reviewing what our play calls are, right? I'm in my head reviewing positions. And so if somebody came up to me and said, hey, are you good? Like, is everything okay? Like, I was like, yeah, man, I'm great. I'm doing great. I'm just quiet because I'm trying to process shit. I would much prefer, and I'm actually grateful for a teammate who did that once. And I was just like, no, I'm not grouchy. I'm not having a bad time. I just don't understand what's happening. Right. And so, at least like when I've worked with like kids or coaching or anything like that, I want to make sure that I ask them, like, hey, if we're having a miscommunication, like, hey, it could be you. It could also be me. There could also be something else going on. Right. Like, hey, maybe you're not doing that drill because your wrist hurts and you're scared to tell me. Like, and I'm sitting here yelling at you, and you're like, well, my wrist actually hurts and I can't actually perform that, technique or whatever, whatever. It's like, um, but I'm trying to remember what happened the first day we did our contact session. There's this one guy, and unfortunately he never came back. I never saw him again, but he was making some really weird mistake, and he was doing something. He was coming in with his elbow. I'm trying to remember what it was, but I was just like, "Hey, man, are your hands okay? Like, are you scared?" I think it was like a fend or something like that. And he was like, "No, my hands are okay." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Um, and then he just kept kind of doing it very weird, very weird. And finally, he says, "Oh, this is my first time doing it." And I was like, "Oh, that explains why you're doing this so fucking poorly." I didn't say that, right? But I was like, "Hey, yeah." And I wish I could remember what it was, but I was like, dude, you have to change this now, or you're gonna hurt someone, or you're gonna hurt yourself, right? He's doing
Yeah.
something weird with his elbows. He's doing something really weird with his elbows, right? And I was like, yeah, man, like you can't. You're like, yeah. And again, all it took was him saying like, oh, this is my first time, and I was like, oh fuck. So I don't know what
Yeah.
the fuck you're thinking. You might think there's a totally different purpose to this drill than there is. And so again, I think like going up and asking players just like, hey, what's going on? Like, what's going on? And even like I can remember being in the gym and like one day, I forget who it was, one player was just like not doing so hot. And I was like, did you drink this weekend? Did you get really fucking drunk this weekend? And the kid was like, yes, I did. And I was like, it shows. I was like, have a seat. Like, have a seat. You don't look good.
Relax.
Right? But it's also,
We'll get you some
what's up?
electrolytes. We'll get you some electrolytes. Just relax. Do you hear me?
Yeah. And also, like, I mean, I think about that. What's up? Sorry, I cut out for a second.
Yeah, there's a delay. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. And like, I could think about what I could have done in that moment. I think the kid was like 22, right? And I could have like sat there and said, you fucking piece of shit. This isn't serious. This is all this other shit. And this guy he probably would have said,
Right.
bro, I'm fucking 22. Fuck you. It's a fucking weekend. We're not even in season. I'm going to do what the fuck I want. Right. Like, he would have just said, fuck off, man. Like, why the fuck? Like, I want to get fucking hammered on the weekend. And I said, hey, man, if you're going to get drunk, I think the only thing I said was like, give yourself another day to recover. Like maybe I was like, maybe don't. I was like, maybe we learned a lesson here that like drinking that much isn't going to be conducive to doing these sessions. And like, maybe you should do it on Friday. And that's everything. If you're gonna go that hard. I just said, yeah. And guess what? He was there on Wednesday, crushing it. Right? Like he was there on Wednesday, crushing it. I'm not gonna sit there and give that kid a fucking lecture about drinking because I did the same bullshit when I was his age. So
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I get again. I think that's just something where it's like, yeah, some people are gonna respond to that really intense shit. Some people aren't. I don't personally. It doesn't bother me a ton, but I also don't respond well to it. But I think it's just important to ask, like, hey man, what's going on? Like, is there something going on? There's obviously you have oh shit. John Donaher. Uh, he's the famous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. Famous Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach. He's the guy who coaches Gordon Ryan. He coaches what's called New Wave. He had the Donaher Death Squad. He coached George St. Pierre, right? Like the guy is probably considered the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach of all time, period, ever. I mean, like kind of undisputed. And he said something that when he is coaching his athletes during their competitions, he actually doesn't give them specific techniques, right? And this works a little bit better in his situation because principles are more immediately applicable, and he is dealing with exceptionally high level athletes. I mean, the people he's coaching are I mean, these guys all have like 30,000 hours of fucking Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practice, right? So it works a little bit better because they're able to immediately apply these principles. But he said something where when he's coaching in person, he doesn't like saying specific techniques. He only likes naming principles. And as an example of this, he was talking about one time where he's coaching Gordon Ryan, and Gordon Ryan was doing something that he didn't understand, right? And he yelled out, you need to reestablish your wedge, which is a term that he uses for certain Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu principles. And he said, I'm glad I did that because I later found out after the match that his wrist was broken. And if I had sit there and said, you need to get the underhook, right, it would have created cognitive load for him because his wrist was broken, and so he couldn't establish an underhook. So instead, he said, you need to go back to your principles and you need to figure out a way to accomplish the same goal, right? So anyway, I sometimes think I haven't quite always figured out how to do that, especially in a situation like rugby, in a sport like rugby, I mean, or like even in the gym. But I think about that too, where it's like the specific iteration of something I'm trying to express based on the individual might change a lot. And so like sitting there and telling an individual to just do like one thing instead of saying like, hey, why did you do that? What did you see? What did you experience? What were you thinking? Right? Because maybe I'll gain some insight where, I don't know, maybe a player does something dumb in a game, right? And you're like, hey, I just want to know why you did that. And you're like, well, I saw them do this 3 times, and it just so happens that the 4th time they didn't do it, and I took a gamble and I fucked up. Okay, yeah, maybe that's maybe it sucks in that situation, but maybe that's what you want from a player. And it's just so and it's like, okay, well, let's take those skills and advance, develop them, because in 3 months, maybe you will start getting those calls right.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
I mean, think about how many times in a game you recognize a pattern and we're like, oh, we're calling an audible, we're doing something else because our play, I can see that they're going to do something, they're going to set something up, right? We need to fucking ditch that, right?
Sure.
We need to ditch
Sure.
that. I'm seeing something.
Yeah.
That
Well,
is
in
not
rugby
textbook.
specifically, it's always a measurement of risk and reward. It's always a measurement of how much time is it going to take me to do, how much time is it going to take away from the opposition, how much of it is a risk. And so
Yeah.
sometimes players make judgment calls and it doesn't work out. It's unlucky. That's what I like. That's the verbiage I like to use. If I can see that otherwise would work in the right circumstances, I just say unlucky. Like, don't be dissuaded on trying that technique again, because that might actually work in the right circumstances, or maybe I tweak it. Like, don't do that in structured play, do that in unstructured play, getting to that principles. I like that. I wrote that note down. Harp on principles, not techniques. Don't say, oh, you should zig here instead of zagging. No. The principle of finding space is what you should remind a player of, right? Or, the thing that I always talk about that you've encouraged me to make a video on, which I will do, is T-Rex passes. I say, don't do T-Rex passes. But the principle behind it is don't lose momentum. Don't do high risk. Don't do high risk shit.
Frequently.
When you're don't do high risk activities when you've broken the game line, or maybe or don't do high risk things when you're on the back foot, right? That's I gotta refine that. I gotta make that better somehow, but that's what I should harp on, and then let the players figure out for themselves when not to do an offload, and when it would be a T-Rex pass and when it wouldn't be. I think that would be way more useful as a teacher and as a leader than saying, in that specific situation, this was a T-Rex pass and you shouldn't do it in that situation, because they're not going to fucking retain it. They don't even know what they did anyway. It's rugby. They were upside down. They had somebody kicking them in the face, and they heard somebody called for the ball, and so they went, man. Like,
yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, and also, like, what are you going to do? You're going to punish a player where they're like, well, somebody called for the ball and I passed, and you're like, okay, well, that's your fault. And so it's like now you're dealing with a conflicting message where it's like, well, I want you guys to pass when people call for the ball, because selfish ball play will kill you. Selfish ball play will fucking kill you. And then now you're saying, okay, but in these situations, like, you have to be selfish. Like, I can understand why that's going to be very conflicting for a player, right? Because, like, what am I supposed to pass? What am I not supposed to pass? And instead, what's up? You're going to show me something?
Show you something. I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to show you something.
No, go for it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So this is one of the camaraderie things. So this is the end of practice. I wasn't there to tell everybody to do it. Can you see that? Can you see the huddle?
Yeah. That's awesome.
So that's what I'm talking about, as far as like little things, that remembering people's birthday, remembering people's names. I think that kind of shit goes a long way back to our original conversation about, like, over a year. Those are the little things you should focus on versus how hard they ran that day or whatever. So anyway, they were doing that, so I didn't mean to throw a rules there, but
No. It's good. I mean, we're approaching 2 hours. It's probably a good time to sort of wrap up.
Yeah.
And
so
I'm sure we could do several more of these.
Yeah, I totally agree. so the one thing I did want to mention that we didn't get a chance to, just to get back. So on these workouts that we're doing, the one thing I'll give you kudos on that I think has been particularly effective that isn't actually exhausting at all are A skips. And so, you have these videos, these instructional videos that you have links to in your program. And I and my players have elected to pay attention to or ignore those as we see fit, right? Because fuck you,
as,
whoever we want.
as they do.
So,
None of this is a surprise to me.
But so like the particular rows, we're limited by some of our equipment here in the clubhouse. So I just pick something that's a similar movement. It's like, let's just go on. But the A skips, it's an A skip. You don't need any equipment, right? Yeah. But I would say 80% of the players that have participated in these strength conditioning sessions can't do an A skip properly. And if they can do an A skip forward, they can't do it backwards. And if they can't do it backwards, they sure as shit can't do it laterally. That's where they really get fucked up. Right. And so like, that's not like that's mental training. I mean, it's mind body, I suppose, but being more coordinated as an athlete, like how important is that on a rugby pitch? And so being able to, ladders. Yeah. Well, we've got some. Say hi to Bam.
What's up, buddy?
So, yeah, totally great. So, but my point is that, just getting good at doing that kind of stuff is totally measurable because it's objectively observable. Can you or can you not do an A skip? And can you do it in such a way that you don't look like a goofy idiot? Right? That's a measure on how you are as an athlete. Can you control your own body or not? Right?
Yeah.
And so, so that was just one thing I think is particularly good about your speed training that we're doing is just the A skips or in any of those movements that it's like, you have to be a coordinated athlete to be able to do that. You have to get up to that level first. And then let's talk about doing incremental improvements. And then the other thing, when we were talking about coaching, you were talking about asking for feedback. I think it's equally as important to be vulnerable as a coach. So if you're running a session, even if it's a S&C session, but I would say certainly when you're trying out a drill or the players just aren't getting it or whatever, instead of getting frustrated, stopping and going, what's going on, fellas? Like same kind of thing, but from a place of are we not feeling it? I can do something else. Like, we don't have to do this drill. Like, it's totally fine. I'm just trying to make it right. Just be vulnerable. Just be like, if we're not getting it, it's fine. It's not a big deal. You're not gonna hurt my feelings, but let's not waste 20 minutes just plowing ahead through this drill if nobody's getting anything out of it. And I think having that kind of mentality just harkens on everything we've been talking about. It makes sessions more enjoyable. It makes players feel like they can speak up. They can give you more feedback, which ultimately is just going to make their experience better anyway. It's going to make the team better. So I think being vulnerable as a coach, understanding that you don't have all the answers and sometimes you fuck up. Sometimes you put a session together as an S&C coach or as a rugby coach or whatever, and it's just not jiving, man. Like, that's fine. Let the players go, hey, this is fucking stupid, coach. I don't want to do it. Let's do something else. Like, that's okay. At least at the amateur level.
The first speed session I ever did with a professional team was, the players didn't know this, but from a coaching perspective, it was a fucking disaster. It was a fucking disaster. And I had to go to the head coach and say, yeah, that didn't go the way that I wanted it. But next time we're not going to make that mistake. And next time we didn't. Right. And I have to say, like, the number of times I've learned things in the moment because it was like, shit, that's not working. We can't do that with these guys. I just have to do something else. And being so I told the players this, that like the first, actually, I don't know if I told the players this. I told them this after, right? I definitely told them this after, but I'm not sure if I told them in the moment. But now having more experience with the players, I tell them now, right? Like the first two workouts we did together, I just had like a couple notes on my phone, right? It was not super organized because I didn't want, because I had no idea how the session was going to go, right? I had no idea. I was like, fuck, I don't know. I have a decent idea of how long some of these things are going to take, right? I have a decent idea that these are like things that can be taught pretty quickly and picked up quickly and implemented quickly, but I actually don't know. So if I have like 10 exercises on here and I'm attached to every single one of them, right, it's going to be a bad time, right? So it's like, and maybe I have 5 exercises on here, and like this is just the experience of being a coach, right? It's like I know like the 3 things that we have to get done. And if we get those done, fuck yeah, hell yeah. And then we can have a little dessert and I can do something else at the end, or we can even just play games or something like that. Right. But I was like, I don't know how you guys are going to interact with this environment, with this program. So sitting here and writing everything out, and it's why people didn't get sheets till week 2. Right. It's like, because I don't want to give you the sheet, because as soon as I give you the sheet, it's official. Right. As soon as I give you the sheet, there's a permanence there, right? And we can't fuck around with the sheet. Right. And I know that's silly, but it's true. That's an idea that we have often as people. And so I was like, so we're just going to go off these notes on my phone, and I'll take notes, and we'll see how the first two, maybe it was 2 weeks. I can't remember at this point. But I was like, we'll see how the first few sessions go. Right. We'll see how the first few sessions go. We'll see how many people show up. We'll see what the ability level of those people are. Right. And what ended up being on the sheets didn't deviate all that much from the notes that were in my phone. It deviated not a lot, but I was very willing to say like, oh, this isn't working. We're going to move on. Oh, this is working really well. We're going to do something else. Right. And I also need to be cognizant of the fact, like you said, like a lot of the stuff I do is like, depending on the field of S&C that you're in, especially if you're sort of working with a lot of like former football players, especially who are coming from like high school lifting programs, like I'm not going to say that the shit, like some of the shit I do just looks like straight up lifting, but like some of it doesn't. Some of it's kind of weird, right? Especially some of the lower body stuff. It's like, this is kind of weird. I'm not used to doing this, right? And so it's also like I have to, yeah, but it's like I have to be there and understand that, like, hey, if I throw a million new things at people, like buy-in's really important. And again, we talked about the rest periods. People, especially like rugby players and like football players and even like and wrestlers for sure. Like anybody who's coming from like a combat sports background, right, is gonna say like, I caught my breath, I'm ready to go again. Right. Like I want the absolute minimum rest time period. And then so just convincing people, like, how do you convince people like, hey man, you should just be fucking chill. Like, because that's the opposite. That's the exact opposite of what we tell people during practice all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like we tell people during practice, you gotta be dialed in, you gotta show up, you gotta be fucking first minute, you gotta be 100%. We can't waste time, right? Like people say that shit so much. And then I'm just like, that's fine, man. It's just fine.
Everything's cool.
I sound like a fucking hippie, like, and I get it. And so I think one of the things that I appreciate about you is a lot of people can see that as kind of like soft, right? Like a lot of people are like, oh, you're being soft. And
I've heard that.
Yeah. And like, A, no, I'm not. But B, even if I am, who cares? Like who cares? Like I actually don't care that much, because the fact of the matter is you're gonna like you're gonna I mean this in the kindest, most complimentary way possible. You're gonna find out if people want to be there on game day anyway. And by that, actually, let me actually say that in an even kinder way. People are going to find out whether or not they want to be there on game day. That's actually an even kinder way, because they don't need to prove to me. They don't need to prove anything to me. They literally, a kinder way to say that is they actually have to decide if that's a meaningful activity for them, which they are allowed to do, right? Like they're 100% allowed to say like, oh, I actually didn't like that. That was not a fun experience for me.
Right, that's fine. Intense. Rugby isn't for everybody. Just whatever you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's probably.
Sorry, I thought you had said. people see me as soft as a coach, and that's why I said that I'd heard that. So I misunderstood you there. So I've never heard anybody say that you're soft. I hear all the time that as a coach, I should be harder on my players. I'm too soft, right? But it's the same mentality of what you're saying. It's like, I don't need to come down on these players. Like, you're 39 goddamn years old. I don't need to come down on you. Well, if I need to come down on you, then you're an idiot. You don't belong on a rugby pitch anyway, because you're gonna hurt yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You can come down on yourself as much as you want to. You're a grown ass man. You're fine.
Yeah.
Show you how to do the things and be there to help, and then get out of your way. It's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. And I have seen you be an absolute fucking hard ass when it mattered, right? I have seen you. There was one incident where there was a lot of drinking involved, and I'll just say that. And you brought the fucking hammer down, because so if people want to say you're soft, you could say, well, there was something that actually crossed the line for me, right? And I said, if you repeat this behavior, you will never play for us again. Right? That's not soft. like that's not soft, right? That was literally like, no, this is important. You cannot do this for at least three very important reasons. Three very important reasons you can't do it. And you said, so therefore, if I ever hear about it again, you're fucking done. Right. And that was it. So I don't know. To me, it's you all you've done. You're not soft. Like, all you've done is decide what's important and said, these are the actual non-negotiables. And then everybody else has to decide what's important to them, which isn't soft. It's just being fucking a human being and realistic and understanding
so
what
with you too,
what we're
so like,
planning for.
you know, so I haven't actually heard it myself, but I've heard, I can imagine people being like, you know, you have a different approach to things. You know, you started playing rugby in your mid-30s. You go about it differently. But I can tell you, on a pitch, there are a handful of players, Pablo's another one, where I can put you in whatever position and then just trust that you're going to be where you need to be. You're not probably going to get injured, and you're not otherwise going to compromise our game plan at all, right? You're one of those athletes because, you know, where I'm sure, or from what I've heard you tell me, like, people are maybe concerned about your lack of effort, or you're otherwise not seeming engaged. I can tell that you're dialed in, and I can tell that you're, like, when you need to throw it down, when you need to drop the hammer down, when you need to tackle the guy in open field, if it gets to that situation, like, I don't even worry about it. Everybody's biting their teeth, and I'm like, oh, Jesse's got it. It's fine. Or Jesse's going to be there for the ruck. We're not going to lose this phase, whatever the situation. You're one of, like, 5 players that I can fundamentally trust to do that. Pablo's the other one. But yeah, I don't think rugby needs those guys that can just put in. If I had to leave you in for 80 minutes, I know you could figure out how to manage your energy and be there for 80 minutes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's not, so it's like well, thank you. I mean, that was a very, very kind thing to say, and I'm feeling a little bit bashful. But like, again, to your credit as a coach, it's like, yeah, you figure that out. You figure out, like, hey man, like, being harder on someone in practice doesn't necessarily make them like that doesn't mean that if they have to make a hard fucking tackle, like, that person has already decided, like, whether or not they're going to make that hard fucking tackle, or they're going to take that hit, or they're going to get back on defense. And, like, the best you can do is just give them the tool to be successful at that activity, right? Totally. But again, it's like that's all you can fucking do. And then, you know, maybe you just say, like, hey guys, like, it's really important that you get back and support. Like I have now seen in 3 different instances where an effort play saved a try, right? And effort play absolutely saved a try in 3 different instances. And so it's like, yeah, you start seeing that stuff's important. And like all you can do at the end of the game is like say, hey, you see that effort play? That's just effort. That's just pure fucking effort, right? Like I can't coach that, right? Like you have to want that. That's an intrinsic want, and like, but it's up to you. And so again, like I don't think that's a matter because I have been accused of being soft, right? I've been accused of being soft as an S&C coach, and my counterpoint would be I'm not soft, I'm effective, right? I'm
Right.
so
Totally agree.
uninterested. Yeah, I'm so uninterested in extra work. I'm so uninterested in extra work. Like I want the absolute like how effective can we be, right? Like I'm not soft. I'm just not indulgent, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
not gonna sit there and say like, hey man, wind sprints are gonna make us tough. I'm like, no man, that
So
person has decided whether or not they like rugby enough to take those hits.
yeah. Well, and I think that's an excellent segue to close because my battery's got like 2% left.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I'll tell you that, and I said this in the dry room, that um, I think you come, I think you approach your vocation in a unique way that's also passionate. I think you really care about what you do. I think you really care about your clients and you really care about them getting better. I think that's what makes you happy. And anybody that has that approach, that wants to be my friend, that wants to be involved in what we're trying to do here, I got 100% respect and trust in you, my friend. I think what you got is really special. So,
Well, thank you. Well, and again, let me say this as I don't think I've told you this as long as we're fluffing each other up. Um, I am actually very, very grateful for the opportunity to work with the team because I don't think I've ever had a coach believe in the methods or even have the faith to experiment. Because like I give you a lot of credit as a coach to have some dumb fucking asshole who doesn't even come to practice come in and say, well, you're doing it all wrong. You're doing it all. Some fucking nerdy coastal elite fucking douchebag comes in and just goes, you have no fucking clue what you're doing. You know, you should listen to me. Right. And
yeah,
like,
well, but the thing is that I don't, right? I really don't. I really know what I'm doing. I'm a little baby bird. I'm just winging it. So when somebody comes along that's like, I got a better idea, I listen, right? That goes back to that vulnerability piece.
yeah.
Like I'll let the program's success speak for itself and people can decide for themselves whether or not I'm effective as a leader and a coach. But I know what I'm not good at, and I'm definitely not good at S&C stuff, and you seem to be, so we're going with what you want to do, Jesse. You're the fucking expert by default, my friend.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll say one nice thing about you, and then we should go because I don't want to end on a compliment to me. I want to end on a compliment towards you. You said said enough nice things about me, which is to your credit. I think it's very difficult, especially for a sport coach, right? And again, I mean, I definitely like oversold my rugby experience when I joined the team.
Totally. Fine. It worked out fine. You played fine. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't a lie, but it was definitely like a lie by omission for sure.
Yeah, you didn't correct me, and I was like, yeah, we're running a 1-3-3-1. We're kind of doing a seesaw pattern. We're gonna do some overs unders and then get it out to the wing. You were like, okay. I was like, yeah, so this should be fine for you. You were like, all right. But you did fine. You did fine. I put you at 7.
No.
You did fine.
Yeah. I grabbed the nearest experience forward and I said, tell me where to go. Yeah. It worked out well. It worked out well for me. The day was rough. But to your credit as a coach, I think you should absolutely take pride in the fact that, your ability to be vulnerable, your ability to ask for help, your ability to trust that other people know what they're doing, right? Even when it comes to players, when you have players say, hey, tell me what you saw, tell me what's going on. That's really, really important, right? It helps players feel valuable and valued and listened to. And that's really fucking important because they should be. right? And players are going to see and do things that are difficult to understand from the sideline. Principles, right? Principles, not specifics. And so again, as you're correct, I don't think I've had a coach have as second guess me as little as you have. And so for that, I'm very, very grateful. Like, I can't even tell you the number of times I've given someone a program and then I see on like social media, like, oh, you're doing a bunch of fucking back squatting on top of this program. I was like, that missed the fucking point. Like, this is, that just missed the fucking point. You can't, this isn't like a fucking, this
Right.
isn't like a modular thing that you just tack on to your weightlifting. This is your weightlifting now, right?
Yeah.
You know? And so again, to your credit, I do think what I wrote is the most brilliant rugby program that's ever been designed for amateur program. But but
100%.
hey, you adopted it. Hey, you adopted it. No, and but for real, like that's actually like I can take a tremendous amount of credit for saying, like, hey, I spent a lot of time and effort making something useful. But like, dude, there's so many coaches who are going to look at that and just be like, what the fuck is this? This isn't what we need, right? And just do the status quo.
Well, thank you. And like I said, if all you worry about is being a positive influence in people's lives, and the rest of it just kind of sorts itself out. So if that's your number one goal, then I think in whatever vocation you're in, and I'm an HVAC technician by trade. It's not like I do this full time. This is just something I love to do after work. But the same thing is true there. If I build trust with my customers, you build trust with your clients because we believe in what we're doing. If you have integrity and you just do what you say you're going to do, and you come at it from the right noble intent, which I think is to just help people, then the rest of it will take care of itself.
Yeah, man, absolutely. All right, buddy. Well, it was a pleasure speaking with you as always. We'll schedule one of these again soon. So happy to see the numbers, and I'll see you soon.
See you, buddy. Cheers.